Welcome to the budget editions of Conversation with Dr. Kim. Today I'll be speaking with Jose Formoso, the Assistant Superintendent for Business, to discuss the proposed budget for the 25-26 school year. The budget will be voted on by the community on Tuesday, May 20th. Mr. Formoso will explain the budget development process, how we came to decisions about the budget, including a 3.3% increase to the tax levy, and what this budget will mean for our scholars and the future of the district. While we have had financial difficulties since receiving a designation of significant fiscal distress by the New York State Comptroller, this budget charts a path towards sustainability. It allows us to recover financially while delivering the same programs and services that have supported our scholars in the past. Mr. Formoso has worked hard to develop this budget, which addresses our fiscal concerns while also providing high-quality resources and support to students, staff, and families. Mr. Formoso, can you begin by generally explaining how this budget was developed?
Sure. So the 25-26 budget was developed using a collaborative approach. It was a little bit different this year, mainly due to the fiscal stress that the district was under. We first had to start by developing a plan to significantly reduce expenses in the coming school year while maintaining educational programs. During the school year, work was done with the Budget Committee, the Board of Education, the Central Office, and building level administrators to put together a balanced budget that moves the district closer to fiscal stability.
Where can the community go to read more about the proposed budget?
Sure. So this year, to make things simpler for community members, we're going to put the link right on the homepage. So if community members just go to www.mtvernoncsd.org, they'll see a link up at the top where the nav bar is that will be titled Budget. You just click that link and they'll have all the budget information.
Can you explain what a school district budget is made up of? Also, what are the different sources of revenue, and what are the areas that the district spends on?
Sure. So a school district budget is made up of both revenue and expenses. On the revenue side, that's mainly comprised of school taxes, which make up about 52% of next year's budget, and then state aid, which comprise about 42% of the budget. On the expense side, which is our appropriations, it's broken down into three parts. It's what's called a three-part budget. The first part is programs. So programs is the category that has all expense items directly attributed to the education of students. Capital is the second part. This category includes maintenance and operations of school buildings and grounds, and our debt service. Debt service, in case some people aren't familiar with it, that is really what we have to pay in the current year for any debt that we have outstanding. And it's broken up into both principal and interest. The administration component, the final one, includes salaries and benefits for all administrative personnel, including some central office staff, as well as legal services and central services. In terms of spending, about approximately 62% of the budget is on salaries and benefits. 15% is on contractual services, which are primarily composed of student transportation, legal services, special education services, and maintenance and improvements to buildings and grounds.
Thank you for that. How were the revenue and expenditures of the budget balanced?
So this budget was balanced. The district entered the 24-25 school year in a very challenging situation. Just to kind of give a little history on that, since 2019, Mount Vernon has been using its fund balance in order to balance the budget. So what happened was there's been a concerted effort to try to keep taxes low throughout the district to alleviate some of that burden on our community members. By doing so, we've been using our fund balance and it's been diminishing each year. So now we're at a point where we can no longer do that. And it's important to look at both increasing our revenue side of the budget and being able to decrease our expense side. In order to address these challenges, and steady the decline in enrollment that the district has been facing in Mount Vernon, we formulated a reorganization plan of the school buildings, and that will be in effect starting the 25-26 school year. The reorganization is expected to save over $16 million annually while preserving program integrity. The significant reduction in expenditures, along with the 3.3% proposed tax levy increase, were the main drivers of being able to produce a balanced budget for next year.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Formoso. I know we worked really hard on the reorganization, and it's been extremely difficult to consider closing 3 schools and to do the reorganization, and it's going to be our path forward in the future. Maybe we won't feel it immediately, but somewhere down the road, we're going to be in really good shape, and I thank you so much for that. Can you give an overview of the proposed 25-26 school year budget? How much would be spent next school year in the plan?
Sure. So in next year's budget, the total budget is $272.2 million. What that equates to, if you're comparing it to this year's budget, is just an increase of 0.34%.
So the budget has been cut significantly, is that correct?
Yeah, and something that's really important to note, because this is when you compare budget to budget. But when we look at 24-25, we're expected to be about $8 million over budget. So we're looking at being at, by the time this year ends, we're looking about at expenses roughly between $278 million to $280 million. So when you take that into consideration, we're proposing a budget that is significantly lower than where we're going to end the expenses this year at.
Thank you for that. What were some of the priority areas for spending in this budget?
Sure. So this year there was really a focus on stability. So given the fiscal situation, the main priority was to maintain programs in the district as much as possible while still being able to make a significant reduction in overall spending.
Okay. How much money is being saved by closing 3 schools? How does this help the district maintain its programs and limit other reductions?
So approximately $16.9 million is being saved by the reorganization, which includes the closure of 3 school buildings. We determined this number by creating 2 budgets. So we created a budget where if we kept everything the same, what would next school year look like given the increases that we're seeing in transportation and health insurance? And then we created another budget with the reorganization. And that's how we were able to determine the actual cost savings of $16.9 million. Without this reorganization, the district would have to make significant reductions in programs and propose a tax increase that would be well above the 5% tax cap in order to produce a balanced budget.
Can you explain how statewide decline in enrollment, expensive building repairs, and our designation of significant distress led the district to school closing?
Sure. So this was by far the biggest challenge we were facing. When we started this school year, we started to look at a lot of the data, things that had been discussed earlier, but really with the priority of we don't have any more time to really make the significant changes that will be needed. And what I mean by that is we looked at what is the trend in enrollment. We had BOCES do a long-range plan for us. We looked at that plan. It showed a steady decline in enrollment all the way going back from 2014 that is going to go all the way into 2033. And just to give some context into that, in 2014 we had over 8,000 students in the district, K-12. This year we have about 6,500. So that's a significant decrease. But even more alarming was what the decrease will be going forward. So what that study showed is that by 2033 we'll have just over 5,000 students in a district that once housed nearly 10,000 students. The next part is really we looked at what is the current infrastructure and what are the needs that this building need in order to keep the infrastructure up to par. What was done was a building condition survey. That survey showed about $395 million in needed improvements across the school district, which is an enormous challenge for a district considering not only our fiscal condition, but also the amount of buildings that we have, and with the declining enrollment, does it make sense to invest that when you know that your enrollment is going to continue to decline. So really what was determined was, how do we properly align our current and projected enrollment to the school? And that's how we really came up with this reorganization plan and the need to close 3 buildings. It was really looking at all that data and determining what's best now and what's best for the future now.
Thank you for that. You know what I really like about the budget is that we really focus in on our scholars, and we want them to get a great education, and we have never lost sight of that. This is all about the children at the end of the day. I mentioned earlier that there is a proposed 3.3% increase in the tax levy. Can you explain what that means? What is the tax levy, and how much more would a taxpayer be expected to pay if the budget passes?
Sure. So a school tax levy is the amount of money a school district asks the local community to pay through property taxes to help fund the school. The total proposed levy for next year is $140.4 million. That's a 3.3% increase to the school budget, which would bring an additional $4.4 million in revenue to the district. So what we wanted to do for the community was show them, okay, what would this look like for your average homeowner in Mount Vernon? So we took an example property. And what we did was we took the full market value, and the one we used as an example was $555,000. Now, this is the full market value that's on your bill. It's not necessarily what your home would be appraised at if you went to a realtor. It's actually the number that is stated right on the bill. Then we looked at the assessed value, which would be $9,500. By using that data, we were able to determine that the district would have an annual, or the taxpayer, would have an annual increase of about $289. And if you broke that down per month, that's $24.15. And if you look at it per day, that's 79 cents a day, which would generate $4.4 million in additional revenue.
Thanks for explaining that. I think that that's very helpful for our community to understand that.
Thanks.
How much additional revenue would be gained from the increase in the tax levy? What would the district be able to spend money on?
Sure. So as we were talking about, that 3.3% brings in an additional $4.4 million, which is substantial for the district and really helps to put us on the right path. The things that it would support specifically are pre-K, athletics, arts, and also our after-school programs. So those have been some very key initiatives over time. So we take this very seriously, and really that increase will directly support those programs.
And you know, if we couldn't offer those programs, that would be detrimental to our students. We also want to offer a very robust academic school year to our students, but having after-school programs, having summer programs is needed for a lot of our student population. So I'm glad that we're focusing on that with this budget as well.
Thank you. Another key area that this increase supports is being able to properly finalize the outstanding contracts that we have with our bargaining units. As has been discussed, the MVFT, which is a teacher's contract, has been outstanding since 2022. And that's really something that we've been very focused on in looking at ways to settle that contract. This increase will directly support not only settling that contract, but also settling the other outstanding contracts we have with bargaining units.
I mean, and that's very significant as you realize that our staff members are paid less than other surrounding districts, and we really value the work that they do, and they need to be compensated as a result. What would the district lose if we did not increase the tax levy? Would there be additional reductions?
Sure. So that is it's a difficult question, because pretty much everything I said that we would gain, if we weren't able to get this levy approved with this increase, we would lose. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about it, $4.4 million, that would cause issues with us being able to settle those contracts with the bargaining units, specifically the one that we really spent a lot of time on, the teacher's contract with the MVFT. It would also cause further reductions in staff. Those main areas really are pre-K, athletics, after-school programs, and performing and visual arts. Just to name a few. The truth is, depending on how things work out, we might have to look at additional areas as well.
That would be catastrophic. I think that we tried our best to minimize the cuts, and if we have to do additional cuts, that would be extremely difficult. Where's the district seeing increases in the expenses next year?
Sure. So there's really two main areas that we saw that have not only been significant going into next year, but also this year. So health insurance has really been going up across the state. It's hit us particularly hard because of the size of our district. But last year, health insurance went up about 10%, which, in terms of dollars, that's about $3 million. This projecting going into this upcoming budget year, it's 8.8%. But that's also roughly another $3 million in increases just on health insurance alone. The other area is transportation. We have discussed this a good amount. What happened last year is, unfortunately, we had to go back out to bid. Across the state, bids were coming in higher, and we faced that same circumstance. So transportation went up over 40%. What that means is that our budget for this year was under budgeted in regards to transportation by roughly $7 million. We did do a transportation efficiency study. We're still in the midst of that, and we're making a lot of improvements. But next year, we'll still have an increase, because if you compare budget to budget, since this budget was under budgeted $7 million, even though we're going to be able to have a decrease in the expenses, which we projected to be at $19 million, it's still going to be an increase when you look at budget to budget. So we're projecting about a 44% budgetary increase in transportation alone going into next year.
Wow, 44%?
Correct.
What are the areas that the district is decreasing spending in, and how are we trying to save money and increase fiscal responsibility?
Sure. So the main areas that came into play through the closures of the buildings and the reorganization in general, we were able to better align our staffing with our enrollment. So what happened there is that turned out to a net savings of about $11 million when you compare it to this budget year, which is substantial because that's just compared to this budget year. What happens when you roll over a budget, teachers have their steps increased, so there'll be automatic increases happening there. So it's actually, if you compared it to what the budget would have been, it's even substantially higher than that $11 million in personnel services. We were also able to save on our benefit lines. BOCES services, we took a close look at our BOCES services, and we were able to save about $1.6 million in that area. And then our debt service. We have some debt service that has fallen off our books, and that equates to about $740,000 less than what we spent this year in debt service.
Okay. What are some of the areas where the district will have an increase in revenue? How much of our revenue will be made up by state aid?
Sure. So the main revenue source for school district is school taxes, which makes up 51.6% of our total budget, and would account for an increase. With that number, what you're seeing in that 51.6% is the projected 3.3% increase in the levy, which would account to about $4.4 million in increased revenue to the district. The other major area is state aid. State aid accounts for roughly 44.4%, and in terms of dollars, that's $120.9 million. So this week, what happened was the New York State budget was just finalized, so we're still waiting for the revised state aid numbers. What we know for sure is that foundation aid is expected to increase 2% for the district, which would be an increase of $1.6 million.
Please explain how the issue of unpaid taxes has affected the district, and how is this concern being addressed?
Sure. So what happens when you have unpaid prior school year taxes? It creates both budgetary and cash flow issues for the school district. This year, in the fall, the district had to issue a TAN, which is called a tax anticipation note. The district to issue that is because they're waiting on taxes to come in that have not happened yet. So we're able to do that type of borrowing. And the reason you do that borrowing is to cover cash flow shortages. So we were able to do that around the fall of last year. And in cases like this, we have to deal with financing costs. So that's really the negative impact it has, but also it has an opportunity cost, right? So if we didn't have to do that, we wouldn't pay the financing costs. And if we were able to collect the taxes that were due, we would be able to generate interest on that collection. So we lose out on that interest revenue we receive from the bank. So those are really two main areas.
So I'm very glad we were able to take out the TAN to get us through the school year.
Yes. And I believe the other question you asked is how is this being addressed?
Mm-hmm.
So we've been working closely with the city on this since really you've been working for more time than I, but when I started here, we started to collaborate a lot with the controller in that office. And we have been able to address some major challenges that we've been facing. By September of 2025, the district will be whole for taxes that were due from prior to the 2020 school year. So that's a great achievement. We're also currently working with the city and the controller on coming up with a new agreement for taxes that we have coming due in May of 2025. Those taxes are uncollected taxes from the 2020-21 school year and the 21 and 22 school year. So what we're doing with the city, just to give some insight on that, is we're going to be reconciling those through the month of May, and then we're going to come up with an agreement so that we can have that paid in full by the end of the 25-26 school year.
Hopefully, we can come up with a amount that will be helpful for us and also they're able to manage. What happens if the budget does not pass? Will there be an opportunity for a revote?
Sure. So if the budget doesn't pass on May 20th, then the district, really the board has the discretion to put forth a revised budget. So what that could look like is instead of maybe the 3.3% proposal, we do some further reductions and come up with a different increase. That would be more amenable to the community if that's the case. While that will be difficult because it would mean we would have to do further reductions, it's something we would have to do. So a vote would happen on June 17th. So June 17th is the date that there's a statewide budget revote for anyone else putting forth another vote. The other thing the board could decide to do is go straight to a contingency budget. And we can talk about that on the follow-up question. But that would be a very difficult decision. So our hope is that we've done the work, we've shown the community that we have been able to significantly reduce expenses. We have looked at the revenue categories and found ways to increase revenue, and that this will really be a strong budget that we put forth that the community will be able to get behind.
Thank you for that. So I remember last year asking the community to give us grace for the past year. And we've worked hard on coming up with ways to reduce our expenditures, to trim the fat, and we believe that this is our path forward. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, it's almost hard to put into words, but when you think about where we started the year and what we're able to put forth for next year, for any district to be able to come up with a plan to reduce $16.9 million in expenses is really quite amazing. Yes, it came at some very difficult decisions, but it is a major step in bringing the fiscal stability to Mount Vernon.
Thank you for that. So lastly, what happens if the district has to adopt a contingency budget? You made mention that just a few moments ago. Could you explain that to us?
I did. And contingency budgets are really very challenging for a few reasons, which I will get into. But what would happen is we wouldn't be able to put forth a tax increase at that point. So we would lose out on that $4.4 million in revenue that we were talking about. This would lead to further reductions to cover that loss in revenue. Those areas were the areas we were talking about, which are really vital areas to the school district. When you talk about having to reduce athletics, having to significantly reduce pre-K, having to make reduction in our performing and visual arts, and then also our after-school programs. That's very difficult for any community to have to sustain, but especially a high-needs district like Mount Vernon. So we're really hoping it doesn't come to that, but that's what we would be looking at. The other thing to discuss is in a contingency budget, we would have to eliminate budgetary items to our equipment codes fully. So that's also a major challenge and something that would be hard for the district to digest. And then we would also have to reduce administrative costs that would most likely come from further reductions in personnel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time, Mount Vernon. As Mr. Formoso mentioned, you can visit the budget page on our website for more information about the proposed budget. You can also view or attend the budget hearing on Tuesday, May 6th at 6 p.m. at the Board of Education to learn more and ask questions about the budget. The budget hearing will be live streamed on our website. Please take your time to research the budget and consider coming out to vote on Tuesday, May 20th. Voter and polling information is also available on the district budget page, including absentee and early mail voting information. Thank you for joining us on Conversations with Dr. Kim.